So good afternoon. My name is John Thornton. I'm the CEO of Astrobotic Technology, and here today we'll talk a little bit about the company and our progress to date. So what we do is we sell space missions as a service. So you come to us and you buy space missions, and we put your payloads into space and enable your objectives for success. Fundamentally, what's going on in space is that space is broken. You have to play big in space or you can't play at all. Think the billion-dollar companies that spend billions to make billions, or the nation states that it takes to do any kind of major space exploration. There's no small category, so it's extremely hard to get into space. It's very frustrating for scientists. There's hundreds around the world that would love to do real things in space, but can't convince their space agencies that they have the best science, and then can't convince their space agencies that to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to get their payloads and science into space. And we're seeing this problem over and over again in many different categories. So what we do as a business is we sell to small payloads and small customers from around the world that we put in the half to $20 million category. And those are groups that can't afford to buy their own launch vehicles, can't afford to build their own spacecraft, but still want to do meaningful things in space. And we've seen a great demand for this category and a great demand for this service to fly payloads to the moon. We've seen it with national pride plays. So imagine if an emerging nation is the next to land on the moon after China. It would be a very big deal and good international cachet. We found in research and development, marketing, education. Imagine if a high school classroom is driving on the surface of the moon. That would be incredibly compelling for inspiring the next generation of people that are coming up in the STEM side of education. We're actually finding some new ventures that are starting up to take advantage of our service offering and figuring out ways that they can make money off of what we're doing, which is incredibly exciting. That's building that beyond Earth ecosystem that can fuel and sustain itself into the future. So the way that we do this, the way we can afford to piecewise sell these missions is that we fly regular, affordable missions, and what we do is we split up the infrastructure and share it across all of the payloads. So it's shared power, shared communications, and ultimately shared transportation to the different destinations. So what is happening now that's driving this and many other new space companies? One of the single biggest changes that's happening now is the cost to get to space is coming down dramatically. So what typically costs $10,000 per pound, even a decade ago, think Shuttle, Atlas, Delta, this year for the very first time will cost less than $1,000 per pound when SpaceX flies its Falcon Heavy launch vehicle. That is 10 times than it's ever been to get to space. And that transition is happening now, and that is completely redesigning and turning on its head everything that we know about space. And that price will continue to come down. I think of SpaceX as in the Model T era right now, where it's focusing on manufacturing and focusing on bringing those costs down to enable a whole new pricing structure. The next big leap is going to be when we learn to reuse the launch vehicles. When the launch vehicles come back and they don't get tossed in the ocean, and it's not a one-off launch where they land, refuel, and you fly again, and then eventually you can approach the cost of fuel. So $100 per pound maybe sometime into our future. If you think about $100 per pound, that's the same cost per pound of sending something from the UK to Seattle. That, if we ever get there, would be a humongous game changer the way we think about space. It would bring everything in space much, much, much closer than it is now. So another big ingredient of this transformation that we're seeing in space is the embracing of NASA and other public entities in partnering with commercial entities. We've seen it with SpaceX and Orbital Sciences getting together with the COTS program, and we're seeing the same thing now where NASA is coming out with a program called LunarCubes to search for a industry partner to co-develop capability to land on the surface of the moon, so that they and other groups from around the world can purchase that capability in the future. We're also seeing a lot of capital flowing from institutional investors and billionaires. A lot of people hear about the Elon Musks of the world and the billionaires, but there are a large number of institutional investors that are putting serious money into space. And increasingly, the technology is commercially available. You can go buy it, and you can put it into your systems. So we start with the moon. If you can go to the moon, then you can go anywhere in space. It turns out that there's a vast support structure for anyone who's going to the moon. It's incredibly just cool. You talk to the big companies, you talk to the incumbents, and they're excited. They pick up the phone and they say, "Hey, how can I help? How can I be a part of this? How can I get involved?" We've got a great customer pipeline developing for 2015 and 2018 missions. We found dozens of potential customers from around the world that want to fly with us just on our first mission, and I think we've only scratched the surface there. Our most recent customer that we recently signed for our first mission is a company called Astrobotic that's partnered with a drink company that produces a drink called Pocari Sweat, and they will be the first soft drink to land on the moon, and they will land their lunar dream capsule, which will be a time capsule encompassing dreams of children from Japan. So it's an incredibly exciting opportunity for them to engage that younger generation and bring their brand to the moon and show what they're about as a company. We were recently selected also for the Google Lunar X Prize Milestone Prizes. They come in 3 categories: landing, roving, and imaging. It's $1 million, $500,000, and $250,000 respectively. We were selected for all 3 categories, one of 2 companies to be selected for all 3, and we're thrilled to have been selected, and we're well on track, as we'll see a little later in the presentation, for winning those. The other big news lately is that NASA came out with the Lunar Catalyst program. Catalyst, of course, is an acronym. It's the Lunar Cargo Transportation and Landing, and it's quite exciting that NASA would be engaging with industry to co-develop this capability. They want to have a domestic capability to land on the surface of the moon, and the model is that they would put in testing, they put in parts, they put in civil servants, they put in time to co-invest with the businesses to create the landing capability on the surface of the moon. We of course submitted to this, and we hope to hear soon positive news from that soon. So the way the missions work was they're split up into 4 categories. The first part of the mission is the pre-launch and integration services. This is where your payloads would work with our company, and we talk out, okay, what's your payload? Where is it going to bolt? How is it going to work with the system? What destination do you need? How much power do you need? How much communication do you need? How much mass do you need? And we work out all the details and make sure that what the customer builds matches up with our lander at the end of the day. The second part is we go and buy a launch vehicle. We buy the entire launch that a Falcon 9 can throw. That throws 2,500 kilograms to what's called translunar injection. Because we buy the launch, we control the schedule. We control when it launches. We control the contract with that. So it's a date-defined time that we're going to launch. We're not going to get pushed around by a primary payload. Then we build a spacecraft. In this case, the first is a lander in the bottom left there. This is the spacecraft that all the payloads will bolt up to and be released from. So we have you can bolt above the deck, below the deck, on top of the ring, in various different configurations. And we'll be releasing at different destinations in space. The fourth and final part of the mission is actually operating payloads on the surface of the moon. So we provide resources to payloads that fly all the way to the surface with us. We provide them power, we provide them communication, and that's incredibly important for customers because they can focus on the end use of what they're trying to accomplish. They don't have to focus on how to keep the lights on, how to keep the communication lines open. That's what we worry about. So that's the fourth part of the mission. So there's 3 distinct services that we offer. The first is to translunar injection, and it starts at 45,000 per pound. And the way this works is we get let off on the way towards the moon. It's a 4-day trip from when you get released out to the moon. There's some payloads that actually want to fly into deep space beyond the moon. It turns out there aren't a whole lot of launches that go to deep space. So it's very compelling for quite a few groups actually. The second service that we offer is lunar orbit. So this starts at 90,000 per pound. It's a 100-kilometer lunar orbit. So we've got satellites and small sats that are very interested in this, and potentially other landers that want to come with us. They can be let off into lunar orbit, and that starts at 90,000 a pound. It gets more expensive as you go in, and the most expensive is the lunar surface itself, and the reason for that is that it takes a tremendous amount of energy to get there, and we just can't deliver as much mass because it requires so much energy. That starts at $500,000 per pound, and we've got payloads of all sorts shapes and sizes that are interested, from rovers to science experiments to groups that want to make a marketing splash on the surface of the moon, to groups that just want to take pictures on the moon, to all sorts. It's incredible to see the creativity that comes along with having the service that goes to the moon. So what about Astrobotic makes us well suited for this? We've got a 6-year head start. We've actually have a really strong partnership with NASA. We've had 15 contracts to date, with varying degrees of technical aspects that are involved in those contracts, from developing rovers to mission concepts to landing technologies. We've gone through and tested our lunar lander. It's qualified to space flight modes, and we're perfectly scaled for the Falcon 9 launch vehicle, which currently has one of the best price per pound throw capabilities in commercial space today. So a little on the team. I'm John Thornton. I'm the CEO. We've created a nice regular revenue stream here at Astrobotic. I've grown with the company through the course of it. Red Whitaker is our chairman and CSO. He's one of the grandfathers of robotics. He's put a robot on every continent of the world. He was the first to find a meteorite with a robot. He was the first to clean up 3 Mile Island. He was the first to automate agriculture equipment. He put a robot down into a volcano. He's done everything with robotics. Kevin Peterson, our CTO, he was a principal in the DARPA Urban Challenge. So this was an autonomous race through the streets to be the first autonomous car to be able to react to traffic, to stop at stop signs, and basically a full-on autonomous car like we've all dreamed of. So that technology is now being spun into some serious developments at companies like Nissan that will have autonomous cars on the market by 2020 for consumers to purchase. So it's incredibly exciting to see that. And then it turns out driving a car autonomously is not terribly different than having a spacecraft come in, recognize its terrain and what it needs to react to coming down to the surface and landing on the surface of the moon. Bill Reedy is on our board of directors. He's a former NASA astronaut, head of the astronaut corps. He was associate administrator and oversaw the shuttle and international space operations, and ultimately had a $6 billion budget authority, which is about a third of the budget of NASA. Dean Thompson, serial entrepreneur, recently sold a company called M-Spoke to LinkedIn. That's his latest claim to fame. Paul O'Brien brings a good bit of corporate governance to the board. And Vish Karve comes with our partnership with International Rectifier, and they provide space-hardened power systems, and they're definitely going to be providing those components for our first flight. So we've got 3 missions set up into the future. The first one goes in 2015 and explores the lunar pit. The second goes to the pole of the moon and looks for water. And the third could do any number of things, including sample return to geophysical network, to potentially resource exploration, or maybe an early extraction, or maybe as a follow-on to the lunar pit. We're still working out what that 2020 mission will be. So there's 150 of these lunar pits on the surface of the moon, and the one that we go to is in the top right image here. And there's the reason that we picked this one pit. It's 100 meters across, 100 meters deep. And each of these are entryways to lunar lava tubes, but the one in particular in the top right, which is in the Lacus Mortis, which translates to Lake of Death, which sounds dramatic, but the reason we go there is for this one pit in the top right here, and the reason for that is that one of the walls of the pit has collapsed. So if you look at that, it actually is a natural ramp to potentially get down into the pit and drive into the skylight. So it's incredibly compelling from that standpoint. So our mission will land next to that, drive around it, take the first pictures of these up close, and we'll see inside one of these pits for the very first time. It's also possible that one of our payloads might jump into the pit, but we'll keep that one close for the time being. The other interesting thing is if we can learn to operate in and around the pit on the surface of the moon, we can eventually do the same thing on Mars. And it's possible that there might even be life or something very interesting in these caves on Mars. So it's incredibly important for us to figure out how to do this on the moon first before we get all the way to Mars. To give a sense of scale of what one of these pits looks like, it's 100 meters across, 100 meters deep. It's a 100-meter diameter tube that's underneath the surface. So you could actually put a habitat inside of that. This gives a sense of scale next to the Capitol building. So our launch goes on a Falcon 9. It's a 200-foot tall, million-pound force thrust. It throws 2,500 kilograms into translunar injection, and we will launch from Florida. This is how we get there. So the launch vehicle is a two-stage vehicle. The second stage reignites in Earth orbit and sends us to translunar injection, which is then a 4-day trip out to the moon. We do course corrections along the way. There's one braking maneuver when we get close to the moon and we break into lunar orbit. There's another braking maneuver when we start our descent down towards the surface. This is a look at what the lander might look like coming down towards the surface. So talking about the lander, we've built the primary structure. That is the structure that supports the tank, supports the legs, supports the meat of the lander. We've actually qualified this on an industry standard shake table, going through 5 to 100 hertz, verifying that the frequency exceeds that of the launch vehicle, so we don't have any undue coupling there and any undue loads that would be put onto our payloads. So things are looking great on that. We started developing our landing sensors. There's some pictures in the bottom left. We've been on helicopters, we've been on fixed wing, and just recently, this is the big news recently, is that we were just on a propulsive vehicle from Maston, and they have a propulsive vehicle that went up to 270 meters in altitude, and our landing sensor was bolted on board, and this is currently open loop, so our sensors are just bolted on board, going for the ride, and then we're making sure that everything is working, to make sure that our sensors are working, make sure the lasers are working, the cameras are working, make sure our processing is working, make sure our software is working, and then the next flight that we'll do shortly, and probably the next couple months, we'll actually close the loop, and our navigation system will be controlling the spacecraft. So you can think of our navigation system as our astronaut in the box. So I'm just going to play this video here from the Maston test, and you can get a sense of what this thing does. So just finishing up, so that was the landing that occurred at Maston. We're incredibly excited that everything went beautifully. The software performed as expected. The hardware performed as expected. The test went just as we had hoped, and we're going to be planning future tests in the next couple of months that will close the loop and actually control the lander all the way down to the surface of the moon. So we sell lunar payload. You can bolt on any location on the surface of the payload, or on the surface of the lander, sorry. You can be bolted to the underside of the deck. You can be bolted on top of the deck. You could be bolted on the top ring. We can leave you off in lunar orbit. We can leave you off at translunar injection. We can bring you all the way to the surface with us. We're thrilled to be in this business, and we're seeing incredible feedback and response to this service offering, and we're really excited about it, and we're looking forward to that first mission. So from here, I'll take any questions.